So the All Blacks against England. The Scott Robertson era gets up and running, and England challenge themselves with probably, I think, the biggest challenge of the Steve Borthwick era as they head to New Zealand for 2 tests against the All Blacks. Welcome back to the channel. How do you see the game going and what are the big talking points? I'm going to go through mine. Is it an opportunity for England? There's a sense of the unknown. I think there's some interesting individual battles within this game. But there's lots to get into, so you have your say in the comments section. Whilst you're here as well, like the video, that just boosts it to as many people as possible. It helps the algorithm. And subscribe to the channel. That way, you don't miss a thing. I think one of the really intriguing questions for me when I consider this series is how big an opportunity is this for England? England have only ever won 2 test matches against New Zealand in New Zealand, in like the 70s and 2003, just before the World Cup, the year that they went on to win it later that year. But is this an opportunity for this England team, who in quite a short space of time, they had all these questions around them, the form wasn't great off the back of that defeat to Scotland at Murrayfield, but then they went against Ireland at home, had a great win. They went toe-to-toe with France away from home, they lost that game, but they still came out of it with a lot of credit. It is a team that has been moving in the right direction, and a team that I think has actually developed a lot under Steve Borthwick. There is now a lot more pace in the back 3. We've seen development in that back row, and in fact, quite a lot of players have kind of come and gone. The front row is probably where it is still relatively lack of development there, but it's a team that has developed a lot. So how big an opportunity is there for this England team, given the fact that there's a lot of unknowns for the All Blacks to get a victory in New Zealand? It would be pretty historic, frankly, and would be the best sign we've seen so far that what Steve Borthwick is doing is working and getting them to where all the England fans will hope they will be again, which they haven't been for a while as one of the best teams in the world. So I think that's really intriguing. How do this England side front up away in New Zealand? Massive, massive couple of tests coming up for them. And then on the flip side of that, it is a bit of an unknown for New Zealand, isn't it? I think there's a huge amount of excitement, actually. It is a new era. Scott Robertson coming in. I was watching his press conference yesterday, and he's just incredibly likeable, isn't he? I can imagine if you are a fan, you love hearing him speak. He's so candid and honest, which is quite refreshing. You don't feel like he's trying to pull the wool over your eyes or playing any sort of mind games. He's quite upfront, and he's the sort of coach I can imagine players will love to play with. So you can understand why there has been such a clamour for so long for him to replace Ian Foster, and the excitement of what he can do in this role as well, and kick New Zealand on. So I think there was a lot of excitement, but how much of an unknown is it? I suppose that's a question for the All Black fans amongst you. Because of how early in his reign this is, new coach, some new players. I suppose they have had a bit of time in camp, haven't they? They've had some camps earlier in the year, but how well aligned are they? Does it leave the door open for it to be an opportunity for England, or would you say that's not quite the case? Do you think this is going to be a team that are able to hit the ground running? But let's talk about some of the individual battles in the game. Back row for me is one that really, really intrigues me, because the makeup of this England back row has changed a lot in the last sort of 12 months or so, to the place where I think it's in a great place really when you consider Ben Earl has been exceptional at number 8, Chandler Cunningham himself has slotted in excellently at 6, and actually some of his performances in really big games for Quins, away to Bordeaux for example in the Champions Cup, has been excellent in terms of the work he does all round the pitch, his carrying, his tackling, he hits hard, he hits rucks, and then the return of Sam Underhill at 7, one of the best tacklers in the world, certainly the best tackler in the England squad. You've got Tom Curry returning from injury off the bench as well. So England's back row I think is in a good place, and you're going up against some big hitters. Ardie Savea, Dalton Papali'i, the selections in that area of the field for Scott Robertson I think makes it an incredibly important contest, because one thing this New Zealand team have done really well, and in particular if you look back to that quarter-final win against Ireland in the World Cup, is go at the breakdown and compete at the breakdown and be absolute menaces. As a back row and as a forward pack more generally, I think that is an area that will be incredibly competitive this weekend and could be absolutely key for who comes out on top. So the back row battle is massive, as is the set piece. The biggest difference, I think, between the 2023 All Blacks that ended up losing a World Cup final by just a single point and the kind of 2021, 2022, that era of All Blacks team where they were losing a lot more regularly, there was a lot of negativity around the team. I think one of the biggest things that changed in 2023 was the set piece. Their scrum became, well, really good again, and their line-out was really good again. And that's also two areas that actually England have improved a lot under Steve Borthwick. Their scrum is a lot better, their line-out is a lot better. Which makes, I mean, it's no surprise, is it, with Borthwick being the kind of line-out guru who was as a player and as an assistant coach. But the set piece for these two teams is massive. And it's areas that have been crucial in both of their improvements over different time frames. For the All Blacks more last year, for England kind of, I suppose last year a bit, but in particular what we saw in the Six Nations this year. Set piece is huge. And I suppose from an England point of view, that's when the conversation becomes an interesting one about how is Finn Baxter going to do? How does Dan Cole front up, experienced campaigner? Got kind of that mixture in the England team of experience and newer players coming through, and they need to try and bridge that gap. As for New Zealand, there's some big boys in there. And actually, one of the things that, I can't remember what test series was it, but there was a series previously where, I think it was the Lions. The Lion, whatever it was, what was it, 2017 or something? Yeah, 2017 Lions, wasn't it? Where the Lions had played really well, had built up a head of steam of momentum heading into that first test, and New Zealand went really, really direct and kind of stuck it up the jumper, stuck it at them, and then spread it wide later to win by, was it 15-point win I think they had in that first test in that series. I just wonder whether we'll see something similar, whether they'll look to possibly replicate something along those lines of really try and stick it to England early on. You can imagine it, can't you? You know the challenges of touring New Zealand. You feel like you're in a good place heading into it, but then that first half an hour you are up against it and you're getting punched in the mouth. That you've got a team just being incredibly direct and physical, which is something New Zealand have done brilliantly. That makes life very uncomfortable for England. I wonder whether that is a route they will look to go down, or whether, because on the paper as well, when you've got Marcus Smith at fly half for England and Damien McKenzie at fly half for New Zealand, it's tempting, isn't it, to say we're going to see an incredibly free-flowing, open game of rugby. I think we could do later on in the contest. I think the early stages is going to be pretty bruising. It's kind of my gut instinct on things anyway. And that leads on to the question that I've got written down here. What type of game will we see? Because the backlines are really exciting. I think it's been a real feature of this England team. You look at the back three now, mentioned it earlier, there's more pace in it, there's more dynamism. Ollie Lawrence has come through and broken through in the centres. There's a much better feel and balance to this England backline. But I think ultimately it is the heavy hitters up front. Certainly in that first half an hour, it's going to set the tone, I suppose, for the game. To see who's able to get an element of dominance or hold their own in that area. And I suppose one thing I say as well, in terms of the history that England are faced with, of the challenge of going and beating the All Blacks in New Zealand, not many of those England players have played in New Zealand. They don't tend to tour there that often. I think it was 10 years ago they last did. And maybe that just helps them. Maybe there's just, the ignorance of youth or naivety, however you want to put it, but I think sometimes can help those players because there's less of a burden on them. But yeah, how do you see it going? Interesting fullback selection as well. Beauden Barrett on the bench. Stephen Perafita at fullback. Good under the high ball. Perhaps expecting a bit of a barrage from England. Might go back to their kind of kicking game, kick heavier game, play territory, which would make sense. It would be quite a pragmatic approach, particularly when you're away in New Zealand. So yeah, I think it's really intriguing because there's opportunity there for England. There's a bit of an unknown amongst the All Blacks, but I think that is manifesting in a lot of excitement as well for what this New Zealand team can look like and where they can develop and what they can become under Scott Robertson. So I'm excited for it. I'll be up early here in the UK to watch it tomorrow morning. How do you see it going? Who do you see winning as well? Realistically, I feel like if England are going to win a test, it needs to be this one because it's Eden Park after this, which is one of the most incredible records, I think, in all of sport of the All Blacks winning streak there. Can England spring a surprise on the opening match of the tour? Possibly. Like, they've got a chance. There is opportunity there. It's a huge challenge. Let me know how you see it going. Like the video. Also, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. I'll see you in the next one.